Have you ever tried everything to stop thinking about someone, only to discover that the harder you try, the more they seem to occupy your mind? You tell yourself it's over. You delete the messages. You remove the photos. You keep yourself busy with work, family, friends, or hobbies. You convince yourself that you've moved on. But then, out of nowhere, something reminds you of him.
Wow.
A song, a familiar scent, a place you once visited together. Or perhaps you wake up from a dream where he appeared so vividly that, for a few moments, it felt as if he had never left. You ask yourself, why can't I stop thinking about him? Is it love? Is it attachment? Or is there something much deeper happening beneath the surface of your conscious mind? Welcome back to the Love and Relationship Lab, where psychology, science, and love come together to help you build healthier, stronger relationships. Today's video explores one of Carl Jung's most fascinating ideas about the unconscious mind and why certain people remain with us long after they've physically left our lives. Stay with me until the end, because what you're about to discover may completely change the way you understand your own thoughts and perhaps even your relationships. Carl Jung believed that much of our emotional life exists beneath our conscious awareness. We like to think we're completely in control of our thoughts, but often we aren't. The unconscious mind continues working quietly in the background, bringing unresolved emotions, forgotten memories, and unfinished experiences back into our awareness. That's why some people disappear from our lives, and we barely think about them again. Yet others remain with us for months or even years. It's tempting to believe that this means they are the one. But Jung would encourage us to ask a different question. Instead of asking, "Why can't I stop thinking about him?" he might ask, "What part of myself becomes alive whenever I think about him?" That question changes everything. Because sometimes the person isn't the real story. The real story is what they awakened inside you. Perhaps they made you feel truly seen for the first time. Perhaps they represented safety, adventure, acceptance. Or maybe they triggered an emotional wound that existed long before you ever met them. Sometimes we believe we're holding on to a person. In reality, we're holding on to what they came to represent. Think about this for a moment. Have you ever met someone who wasn't perfect, yet you couldn't let them go emotionally? Meanwhile, someone who treated you wonderfully simply faded from your memory. Why? Because emotions don't always follow logic. The unconscious doesn't keep score the way the conscious mind does.
Wow.
It remembers intensity. It remembers transformation. It remembers moments that changed how we saw ourselves. This is why you may suddenly think about him while driving to work, or while making dinner, or while sitting quietly before going to sleep. Not because you're choosing to, but because your unconscious is trying to complete something your conscious mind has not fully understood. Many people mistake this for destiny. Others call it a soul connection. Jung didn't necessarily describe it that way. Instead, he believed our inner world constantly communicates with us through emotions, memories, dreams, and meaningful coincidences. In other words, your mind may not be trying to pull you back to him. It may be trying to teach you something about yourself. Now, here's where many people become confused. The more they think about him, the more they convince themselves that he must also be thinking about them. Sometimes that's true. Sometimes it isn't. The truth is, we simply cannot know what another person is thinking unless they tell us. But we do know something else. Human beings influence one another emotionally. We've all experienced walking into a room and sensing tension before anyone spoke. We've all felt comfort from someone sitting quietly beside us. Emotions spread. They affect our behavior. They influence the way we communicate. So when someone has played an important role in your emotional life, it's not surprising that thoughts about them continue to surface. The important question isn't whether he's thinking about you. The important question is why these thoughts continue to return. Jung believed that relationships often act like mirrors. They reveal parts of ourselves that we didn't know existed. The confident woman suddenly discovers insecurity. The independent woman discovers vulnerability. The guarded woman discovers her capacity to love deeply. The relationship becomes less about the other person and more about discovering who we become in their presence. Perhaps that's why letting go feels so difficult, because sometimes we aren't losing only another person. We're grieving the version of ourselves we became when we were with them, and that can be incredibly painful. But it can also become one of life's greatest opportunities for growth. Because once you understand what your unconscious is trying to show you, the thoughts slowly begin to lose their power. Not because you forced them away, but because you finally listened. So far, we have explored Carl Jung's fascinating idea that when someone refuses to leave your mind, it isn't always because you're meant to be together. Often, it's because that relationship awakens something within you that still needs your attention. But now let's go a little deeper. Get your favorite drink, snack, or let's go for a walk as we explore. If you've ever found yourself thinking about someone every single day, you may have wondered, is he thinking about me too? It's a question almost everyone has asked at some point. The honest answer is this: no one can know what another person is thinking unless they tell us. Yet something interesting often happens in relationships that psychologists have observed for years. Human emotions influence other human emotions. Think about it. Have you ever walked into a room and immediately sensed that two people had been arguing, even though no one said a word? Or perhaps you've met someone whose smile instantly lifted your mood. Emotions are contagious. Our expressions, our tone of voice, our body language, and even our memories affect the people around us in ways we don't always notice. Carl Jung believed that beneath our conscious awareness lies what he called the unconscious A, place where emotions, memories, fears, and desires continue working even when we aren't thinking about them. That's why a person can suddenly cross your mind while you're washing dishes, driving to work, or listening to a song you've heard 100 times before. Your unconscious isn't trying to torture you. It's trying to finish a conversation that your conscious mind never completed. Imagine a book with the final chapter missing. You wouldn't feel satisfied closing it. Your mind would keep wondering how the story ends. Relationships often work the same way. When a relationship ends without clarity, without understanding, or without emotional closure, your mind naturally returns to it. Not because you're weak, because your brain prefers completion over uncertainty. This explains why sometimes you think about someone who wasn't even the best partner you've ever had. You know they weren't perfect. You know the relationship had problems, and yet they remain in your thoughts. Why? Because unresolved emotions are often stronger than resolved ones. Now here's something that surprises many people. The more you resist these thoughts, the stronger they often become. Have you ever told yourself, "I'm not going to think about him today," only to find yourself thinking about him even more? Psychologists call this ironic processing. The harder we try not to think about something, the more our mind checks to see whether we're thinking about it. It's like telling yourself, "Don't think about a white elephant." What happened? You immediately pictured one. The same thing happens after heartbreak. The more desperately you try to erase someone, the more your mind keeps bringing them back. Jung believed healing doesn't come from fighting your emotions. It comes from understanding them. Instead of asking, "How do I stop thinking about him?" try asking, "Why does this memory still carry so much emotion?" That question changes everything. Perhaps you're grieving the future you imagined together. Perhaps you're mourning the version of yourself you hoped to become. Or perhaps you are finally seeing emotional wounds that existed long before he entered your life. Sometimes another person doesn't create our wounds. They simply reveal them. One woman described her breakup by saying, "I don't think I miss him as much as I miss who I was when I believed we had a future." Those words capture something profoundly important. Sometimes we aren't mourning the person. We're mourning the dream. And dreams can be incredibly difficult to release. Jung often described relationships as mirrors. The people we love reflect both our greatest strengths and our deepest fears. A confident woman may suddenly fear abandonment. An independent woman may discover how deeply she longs for emotional safety. Someone who has always appeared strong may realize she has spent years hiding her vulnerability. The relationship becomes a teacher, not because it lasts forever, but because it reveals parts of ourselves we never noticed before. This is why some people unexpectedly return months later. Sometimes they send a message. Sometimes they like an old photo. Sometimes they simply cross your mind again after a long silence. Many people immediately interpret this as destiny. But life isn't always that simple. Sometimes people return because they are lonely. Sometimes because they are curious. Sometimes because they genuinely miss you. And sometimes they don't return at all. The healthier question isn't, "Will he come back?" The healthier question is, "If he did come back today, would I still be the same person?" Because healing changes us.
Wow.
Growth changes us. Self-awareness changes us. The woman who cried every night 6 months ago may become the woman who politely says, "Thank you, but I've outgrown this relationship." That is real transformation. Last part. The real meaning behind why you can't stop thinking about him. By now, you may be seeing your thoughts in a completely different way. Perhaps you no longer believe that thinking about someone automatically means you're destined to be together. Instead, you're beginning to understand that your mind may be inviting you to discover something deeper about yourself. Carl Jung believed that life occasionally presents us with what he called synchronicities, meaningful coincidences that seem too significant to ignore. Perhaps you've experienced something similar. You think about him, and moments later, you hear his name. A song you both loved suddenly starts playing. You unexpectedly drive past a place where you once spent time together. Or you dream about him after months of not thinking about him at all. Many people immediately conclude, this must be a sign that we're meant to be together. But Jung encouraged people to be careful with that conclusion. He suggested that meaningful coincidences often tell us more about our inner world than about our future. Sometimes, these moments are not pointing you back to another person. They're pointing you back to yourself. Think about that. What if every memory that returns isn't asking you to chase him? What if it's asking you to understand yourself? Because every relationship leaves something behind. Some leave beautiful memories. Some leave painful wounds. Others leave important lessons that shape who we become. One of Jung's greatest insights was that relationships are mirrors. They don't simply reveal who the other person is. They reveal who you become in their presence. Maybe this relationship taught you how deeply you can love. Maybe it revealed your fear of abandonment. Maybe it showed you that you have been seeking your worth through someone else's approval. Or maybe it awakened a confidence you never knew existed. Whatever it revealed, that lesson is far more valuable than endlessly wondering whether he still thinks about you. Here's something worth remembering. Not every person who enters your life is meant to stay forever. Some people arrive to teach you patience. Others teach you boundaries. Some teach you forgiveness. And a few teach you the most important lesson of all, that your happiness cannot depend on someone else's decision to stay. That may be difficult to hear, but it is also incredibly freeing, because the moment your peace depends on another person's choices, you've handed them control over your emotional life. Healing begins the moment you gently take that control back. Instead of asking, "Why can't I stop thinking about him?" try asking, "What part of me still needs healing?" That single question shifts your focus from chasing another person to understanding yourself. And that's where real transformation begins. You stop waiting for a message. You stop looking for hidden signs in every coincidence. You stop believing that every dream predicts the future. Instead, you become curious about your own heart. You begin to understand your patterns, your fears, your hopes, your deepest needs. And something remarkable happens. The thoughts begin to lose their intensity, not because you forced yourself to forget him, but because you finally understood why those thoughts were there. In the first place, understanding brings peace. Peace brings freedom. And freedom allows you to love again. not from fear, but from wholeness. If he returns one day, you'll see him with clearer eyes. You'll no longer be asking, "Will he choose me?" Instead, you'll ask, "Is this relationship healthy for both of us?" That is the difference healing makes.
Wow.
And if he never returns, you'll know that your happiness was never meant to depend on one person. You'll recognize that the relationship served its purpose. It helped you grow. It helped you understand yourself. And perhaps, most importantly, it helped you become the person you were always meant to be. Carl Jung once suggested that, until we become conscious of what lives within us, it can quietly shape our lives without us realizing it. But the moment we become aware of our inner world, we begin making choices from wisdom instead of woundedness. That is the greatest gift any relationship can give us. Not another chance with the same person, but a new relationship with ourselves. If today's message helped you to see love, heartbreak, and healing from a new perspective, may I ask you a favor? Please subscribe to the Love and Relationship Lab, and I will make sure to make more relationship advice videos. Click the notification bell so you never miss our weekly videos, and share this video with someone who may be struggling to let go of a relationship. You never know whose life might be changed by a single conversation. If this message spoke to you, let us know in the comments. What is one lesson a past relationship taught you about yourself? Your story might encourage someone else who is walking the same path. Thank you for spending this time with us here at the Love and Relationship Lab, where psychology, science, experiences, and love come together to help us build healthier, wiser, and more fulfilling relationships. Until next time, remember this: the person you can't stop thinking about may not be the destination. Sometimes they are simply the guide who leads you back to yourself. Stay loved